Hello, it's Mr. Lang, and I'm here to do another vlog. This time it's for the post-World War I unit that includes the 1920s as well. So let's get started. So this is really what Europe looked like after World War I. Again, much of it ravaged. However, the U.S. itself was spared due to the fact there was no fighting at all in our land. Okay? So, what also happens after World War I is we have the Spanish flu epidemic, or influenza. This is a very deadly disease. In fact, it kills about 40 million people, more people than was killed in World War I alone. And again, it infected a lot of the major areas, the port areas, major cities, and so on, just because, again, there's a huge congregation of people. And again, at the same time, in America, we have demobilization. And this definitely hurts the economy because with demobilization, you're going to transfer from a wartime to a peacetime economy. Now, with this, you're going to have huge, rapid inflation. You're going to have a lot of the troops when they come back. They're going to be looking for their jobs. They're not going to be there. Factories are running at 110, 120%, making weapons for the war are now going to be going down and to about 60% or so of capacity, and at that point they're going to also lay off people and of course not give those veterans their jobs back. Now, this leads to a lot of racial tension because again, a lot of the African Americans from the South had come up during the Great Migration during the war. And again, that's about 300,000 or 500,000 African Americans coming to the North to fill these jobs to make these things for the war. And many Americans turn to nativism, like we discussed before, because of this, because of the competition. And this leads to one of the most important riots, which is the Chicago race riot. This happens in 1919, and it happens because a black boy swims into the white part of the beach. Because again, remember back then, we had the Jim Crow laws, where you'd have literally beaches and everything else, bathrooms, restaurants, and so on, seated with a white section and an African American section. And with this, we have a black boy that goes into the African American section, the white section, and when he does, he actually gets stoned to death. People on the beach throw stones at him until he drowns, and this leads to a huge riot across the city. And again, with this, we also get a lot of strikes. I mean, this is a very, volatile world after World War One. And one of these strikes, we have about four of them, and a lot of them are seen as communist. One of them is the Seattle General Strike. Now, the Seattle General Strike, really, the most important thing you need to know about that is that the outcome was that public opinion turned against any type of organized unions or organized labor. And we have the steel strike, which is about 350,000 steel workers that want higher pay, shorter hours, and union recognition. Problem is, company sends in some people to basically split up and divide the strikers, leading to that be a failure. Okay, so we have two strikes so far, both are failures. We have the Boston police strike. We have literally 75% of the Boston police force on strike. So, Calvin Coolidge, also known as Cool Cal, being the governor of Massachusetts, what he does is he says there's no right to strike against the public safety by anybody, anywhere, anytime. And so, of course, he does fire the men that go on strike. And that is a failure as well. So the United Mine Workers strike is successful though. Again, they gain higher wages and better conditions. And it's led by John L. Lewis, and this guy literally becomes a national labor leader for the next 50 years. He's incredibly famous when it comes to these unions. And just to go real quick back to the Boston police strike, Cool Cal had to literally send in the militia in order to keep order in Boston. Okay? We also have the Red Scare, which the Red Scare happens from about 1919 to 1920 because Russia actually turned to communism. And when they did, this leads to fear of communism spreading. Huge anti-communist hysteria goes through not even just the US, but other countries in the world as well. And workers' strikes add to the possibility of a communist plot, people think. And we literally have many bombs that are intercepted by the post office. And even on June 1919, we have 8 bombs go off simultaneously. People thought this was it. This was going to be the communist revolt, but it never did happen. And one of them happened to be at General Mitchell Palmer's house. Attorney General Mitchell Palmer actually leads a lot of these Palmer raids. Okay, very famous, and you need to know it. In 1919, you get a period of these labor disturbances and several bombing incidents. So, Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer launches a series of raids against radical organizations. Most of the time, he didn't even have like search warrants or anything for it. He just went and did it. And he does arrest and deport many suspects illegally. On top of that, we have the Sacco and Vanzetti case. These two men are supposedly killed and shot two employees of a shoe store in Braintree, Massachusetts, robbing it of $15,000. Now, Sacco and Vanzetti were two Italian immigrants who were arrested, charged, and tried for the crime. The men were known anarchists, they were immigrants, and so Sacco owned a gun that was similar to the one used in the crime. The bullets matched, but there was no conclusive proof that they were committed the crime. And so both were found guilty and sentenced to death. And then many think they were executed simply on the fact that they were immigrants. And again, it is very true with this nativist attitude during this time. Okay, but that's the sad part of the 1920s and the early 1919s. We do also have the Roaring Twenties, which this is a great period from 1920 to about 1929 when the stock market crashes. We have a very prosperous nation overall, and a lot of it is because the economic philosophy. Government lowered taxes, so when they did, businesses and consumers spent and invested more money. With that, the economy grew, and it just led to a cycle, something called supply-side economics. And again, we're going to have a lot of people becoming rich during this time. The wealthy goes through the roof. And again, there's a huge amount of changing ways of life because people are going to be going to the cities. For the first time, we have more Americans living in the cities than in rural areas ever. And again, we have New York, 5 million people. Chicago, 3 million people. And this leads to kind of like a conflict between the two. Because urban life is considered a world of crowds, strangers, and so on, very impersonal, versus farm life is considered very innocent. Much like you can see of my awesome farm life book picture, just saying. Now, this leads to a lot of personal ties in the world. People think, again, morals are very much seen in the farm life, in the rural life. And this leads to our next thing, Prohibition. Prohibition's huge. It's a huge example between the clash between city and rural life. And it comes with the 18th Amendment. That gets passes in 1920. When it does, we launch Prohibition. The new law made it illegal to transport, sell, or make liquor. And in fact, we even get the Volstead Act, which helps the federal law, the FBI, enforce this 18th Amendment. And again, there's support for the amendment. Again, we do have a lot of people from rural countries and women and sometimes even children, because they feel that alcohol leads to crime, child abuse, wife abuse, and other accidents. Supporters were largely, again, like from the rural South, including a lot of churches. And again, they put out these propaganda posters much like this. And then we also had the other side of it, the speakeasies, the bootleggers. These are people who believed that drinking wasn't a sin. There was a lot of them too. In fact, a lot of immigrants, because a lot of times they would have, a glass of wine with their dinner. So they didn't see drinking as a sin, and they're not willing to give it up. So to obtain liquor illegally, they went to underground hidden saloons called speakeasies. And people bought liquor from bootleggers. They usually smuggled it in from Canada, Cuba, and West Indies, where Prohibition wasn't around and it was illegal to drink. At the same time, they also went and they made their own, made very potent stuff. And well, this leads to a lot of organized crime. Prohibition contributed to literally the organized crime growth in every major city. We're going to have everyone from Lucky Luciano in New York, King Solomon here in Boston, and of course, Al Capone and Bugs Moran in Chicago. And Al Capone becomes rich off of this bootlegging. And in fact, he took control of the Chicago liquor business by killing off his rivals. One of his rivals being Bugs Moran. He kills off a bunch of his guys in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Very famous massacre, again, over bootlegging. Now, the government fails to really control liquor because, of course, eventually Prohibition's fate was sealed by the government. They didn't budget enough money to actually enforce the law. And on top of that, the moonshiners get out of this. The moonshiners, which are very famous, these are people who really make the potent alcohol from the bathtub gin. They soup up their cars, they get away from the police, race them on the weekends. Before you know it, boxcar racing's born, NASCAR's born. And people start putting superchargers on these cars, and they make the first muscle car. Now, support ends up fading by mid-1920s. Only 90% of the Americans actually supported Prohibition, and many felt that it caused more problems than it actually solved, which was true. So with the 21st Amendment, the first time ever that an amendment repealed another amendment, the 21st Amendment says, finally, Prohibition is ended in 1933. On top of that, we have another battleground during the 1920s between fundamentalist groups and basically people who were scientists and truths of science. We have this huge thing. Now, fundamentalists are basically people who find all truth in the Bible, including science and evolution. back then, we have a huge amount of people teaching the very fundamentalist way of evolution, where there was God that created human beings, the first ones being Adam and Eve. Now, Charles Darwin, says that it's through evolution that human beings became what we are today. We literally started off as monkeys and then evolved into cavemen and so on. And this leads to the Scopes trial because in March 1925 you have Tennessee passing First Nations law that made it illegal to teach evolution. And when that happens, they literally have one teacher that does teach it. His name is John Scopes. He's a biology teacher, and he dared to teach his students that man derived from a lower species. And so we have the Scopes trial. He's put on trial for this. And when he is, they have Clarence Darrow in the corner of the defender, Scopes. And they have the prosecution, who is countered with William Jennings Bryan, three-time Democratic presidential nominee who never quite got the presidency. But of course, the biggest thing that comes out of the Scopes trial is Darrow calls Bryan to the stand. You have the defending lawyer calling the prosecution lawyer to the stand and basically saying, should the Bible be interpreted literally? Literally, Darrow got Bryan to admit that the Bible can be interpreted in different ways. Nevertheless, Scopes was found guilty and fined $100. And again, many different political cartoons came out, again, making fun of the trial, and especially making fun of Bryan and how he basically, gave in. Now, the 20s had a whole different line for women. They literally are looking for a little fun. They're becoming more independent women. They're achieving greater freedoms. In fact, they earned the right to vote in 1920, and of course, they earned more employment opportunities, and so on. And so we do get the flapper. Now, during the 1920s, we have the flapper, which was an independent young woman who embraced the new fashions and urban attitudes. Again, she would be smoking cigarettes, wearing makeup, wearing short dresses, I know, and of course, drinking. Okay? Gonna have to skip through here. Now, big thing during the 1920s is advertising as well. Advertising is everywhere on this new invention called the radio, as well as on billboards. And again, it sometimes played on people's fears that hopefully would, get the consumer to buy that product. And we also had the Ford Motors, the Model T, incredibly famous because with Henry Ford's way of perfecting the assembly line, he literally makes, in 1924, the Model T all the way down to $295 to buy it. And you can buy it on something that's new as well called credit or an installment plan. And because of this, we also get some competition from Ford. However, Ford's was really one of the more cheaper ones. Now, random flagpole sitting. Crazy pastime with these guys. They loved it. Climbed up a building, sat there. Anywho, so radio. Again, most powerful communication medium to emerge from the 1920s. People could get news faster, to a larger audience, and you could even listen to sports live. And some people you'd listen to would be Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was incredible. People would crowd around to listen to these games. And again, he was a larger-than-life hero. Originally played for the Red Sox, won the World Series in 1918, got traded in 1919. That brings on the curse of the Bambino, which was broken in 2004. However, what you do need to know about Bambino or Babe Ruth is that he really became a hero. A lot of celebrities emerged from the radio. Another one would be, of course, Jim Thorpe, considered one of the most versatile athletes of modern sports. Again, the man did everything: baseball, football, basketball, you name it, he did it. We also have another famous celebrity that comes out of this, which is Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh makes the first non-stop solo transatlantic flight. And when he does, it takes about 33 hours aboard the Spirit of St. Louis, and it becomes revolutionary. He's seen as a hero. Now we also have other different things going on during this time, including movies. Now, the silent movie became huge in 1920, but 1927 also saw the first ever talking movie, which was The Jazz Singer, as well as we see Steamboat Willie, one of the first animated things by Walt Disney with sound. Okay. One of the other things that come out of this era is, of course, the Harlem Renaissance. A lot of poetry, a lot of artists, a lot of music, a lot of jazz comes out of Harlem. And of course, this is called the Harlem Renaissance. I am running out of time. You guys, again, if you have any questions, come see me. And that's the vlog. Alrighty, have a great one, guys. Study out.